Both my maternal granddad and my dad served during the war. Grandad, Donald Miles, was only 16 when he joined the Worcestershire Regiment in January 1921 and ended up serving for 24 years. At the time he joined, he was living in Kemsey with his adoptive parents. He was originally posted to the 2nd Battalion of the regiment. While he was in Dover, he met and married my grandma. He later transferred to the 1st Battalion and served in Palestine. At the outbreak of war, he, with the 1st Battalion, moved from internal security duties in Palestine to Sudan. They were involved in operations in Eritrea in 1941 and the Libyan desert before being captured at Tobruk in 1942. While Grandad was stationed in Bethlehem, he sent a Christmas card to my mum, which I still have. It features a photo of the Grotto of the Nativity and contains pressed flowers from the Holy Land. I also have a photo of him wearing his desert clothing. Grandad survived the war and was discharged from the army in November 1945. Sadly, he died in Ronkswood Hospital at the age of 53. My dad, Robert Henry Doane, was in the Royal Navy. At the time he volunteered in July 1940, he was working as a cup handler at Royal Worcester Porcelain, where he worked for 48 years, and was a member of the Auxiliary Fire Service. Dad served on several vessels up until the end of the war, and was trained as a gunner. I know that his vessel was attacked by enemy aircraft whilst in the port of Algiers. Although he wasn't a churchgoer, Dad always said that there were no atheists on board when a ship was under fire. I still have the Bible he took with him, sadly now without its cover. He was awarded the 3945 Star, the Atlantic Star plus France and Germany Bar, the Africa Star, Italy Star and War Medal 1939-45. We still have all these medals in the family, still in the thick brown cardboard box in which they were delivered. As far as I know, Dad never wore them or took part in any parades. Neither did he join any servicemen's organisations. Dad had 4 children after the war, myself being the oldest. We never tired of him telling us stories about the animals kept on board: a ship's cat, a dog, a duckling, and a monkey who became unpopular when he had his bowels open in the sugar supply. Dad used a different expression. And we were fascinated by the tattoo of Popeye the Sailor Man on his forearm that he had done during this period of service. For a long time we had Dad's hammock, which was made from very thick, heavy canvas. He would tie it up in the garden for us to play in. Although Dad never participated himself, he always took me to see the Remembrance Day parade in Worcester. This was a big affair in those days, with many marching bands. I could feel butterflies as the rumbling of the drums approached. It was a very exhilarating experience for me as a young child. Another thing I remember is that Dad always got up by 6 o'clock every morning, whether or not he was going to work. He was able to have a thorough body wash using a small amount of water and Lifebuoy soap, and would always have cocoa at night. I think this was a legacy of Navy days. He would also polish all our shoes every single day. One thing we always had was clean shoes. I was born after the war ended, but growing up I remember certain things remained even in the 50s and 60s. There were still some air raid shelters that we used to play in. There were some near London Road next to the railway line that we used to jump off. They weren't far from where Red Hill Primary School is now. Later on we used to play among the bulldozed remains of the old blockhouse, and I remember being fascinated by a few tattered remnants of blackout blinds, decorated on the inside with tiny gold stars against the solid black. We used to go to Purdiswell on a coach from school to play sports, and always looked out for the Spitfire that used to stand at the gates on Droitwich Road. A lot of the games we played outside were related to war, and in school we often sang rousing historical military songs. One of my teachers always wore an RAF sweetheart brooch. I believe that her fiancé, like many others, had tragically been killed during active service. To some degree there was still a make do and mend approach. Many people grew their own vegetables, Dad had 3 allotments, and made their own clothes. I recall that one neighbour always looked very smart in a pinstriped suit. It was only later that I realised that it was his demob suit, which he wore for many years. Another neighbour was a very despondent man who used to constantly sit at his window watching the world go by. Seeing him there would make me feel sad. He had been a Japanese prisoner of war and probably suffering from what I now realise was PTSD. Like many people, I'm sure, I wish I'd taken more interest while my family was alive, of their accounts of wartime experiences, both as service personnel and as civilians. Later in life, I trained in Birmingham as a nurse and was privileged to hear patients' stories from those days. One of my patients was Lady Wallace, wife of Sir Barnes Wallis, who of course invented the bouncing bomb featured in the film The Dam Busters.